Okay, so let's get this started. Hi, my name is Sebastian. I'm the CTO of yWorks, as you probably know by now. And our yFiles developer team has been working hard on the upcoming releases. And in fact, more than 20 developers have been working on this for the past couple of months since, I believe, mid-January. And today we can finally show you many of those awesome features we have been building for you. And the release is not going to be available for download today, unfortunately, but it won't be very much longer. And I guess it won't be July even. So it's probably going to be June. So feel free to follow our social media channels and keep your email programs open if you want to be among the first to try out the new stuff. So this release, again, puts focus on three major parts of the yFiles API. But as with every release, we have been adding smaller features and been making improvements in all areas of the library. This approach will help both our existing customers with their current development and their existing applications, as will make the life easier for developers when implementing new features and applications. Also, specifically for the yFiles for HTML users out there, there's a lot in this release that will make your life as a developer even easier. Both new users of the library, as well as those who are already power users, will really benefit from these new improvements I'm going to show you. And if you have been following our social media channels closely, you know that there's this big announcement in the area of large graph visualization and performance, and I will get to this shortly too. But as with every new release, there's many more small features, and for some of you, they may be even more valuable than the ones that I will show you today. And today you'll just see a selection of the features that we think most of our users will benefit from. And of course, if you're new to yFiles, there's so much more to discover. So if you belong to that group, don't assume that you will see more than the tip of the iceberg today. Before we take a look at the large graph rendering improvements, let's see some of the less obvious but still valuable new features. We start with the automatic layout. That's also the part that will be coming to all the supported platforms, no matter whether you're using yFiles on the web or on the desktop. So this is also available for C# and for Java and all the versions. As always, there's some new features and improvements concerning to automatic graph layout. The most important and the biggest announcement we have is that we have been making the layouts aware of node semantics, meaning four of our major layout algorithms, the hierarchic one, the organic, the tree, and the circular one, now actually can be tuned to understand the data, to understand the semantics of the nodes. More on this on the next slide. We also have a great new feature, which is around automatic selective edge rerouting, which really helps in interactive scenarios to reroute those edges that need rerouting while keeping those untouched that are already fine. We also have improved the node clustering algorithms for the organic layout, and it will help you to get even nicer results automatically from the organic layout with a couple of choices for different clustering algorithms. And we improved our main demos, which showcase the layout styles, and we added more use case centric views and with configurations that match perfectly certain use cases. Now easier for you to adopt into your own programs. So what's this node type support? On the right-hand side, you see a graph which is arguably nicely laid out. From a layout perspective, it's probably almost perfect. But often, usually, there's meaning behind those nodes, and the layout doesn't understand that there may be a difference between those nodes. So even though the nodes look the same to the layout algorithms, they may have different semantics. For example, they could be labeled items. Labeled property graphs are one such examples. Or there's business data that infers a certain meaning. And so some of the nodes may be different from others, even though from a layout algorithm perspective, they are the same. But it doesn't have to be business data that induces different node types, node semantics. It could also be interactive features like clustering results or filtering results. Imagine you're filtering certain elements on the screen. Why not improve the drawing so that the filter results are seen more easily? Of course, you can also group or optimize the drawing with respect to color or shape, which is also something that is typically not something that the layout algorithm is aware of, because there's different types in graphs, like in nodes. And for example, here we see how you can now provide that type information to the layout algorithm. This is JavaScript code instantiating an instance of the hierarchic layout class. And with the supplemental data that we can provide to the layout algorithm, we can now assign node types. In this case, we infer the type from the business data that is associated with the nodes, meaning that in the graph, for example, the green nodes are different in type than the red ones or the blue ones. Other than that, there's nothing else that you need to do, and the layout will use this information to generate a nice picture. Now let's see how that actually works. Over here. So this is the graph we just saw, and as you can see from the layout perspective, it wouldn't really make a difference if we were switching the positions of these two. But since we know that these two nodes are of the same type, it would be a much better visualization if they were grouped together. We don't need to change the whole layout. This is something that hard constraints do, that which yFiles has been supporting for a long time. But for the cases where we have like soft constraints, where we would prefer them to be rendered more closely together, we can now use the node types feature. Once we turn on that feature, the layout will try to, whenever possible, group nodes of the same type more closely together. Now you see that the red nodes are on the right-hand side and the blue nodes on the left-hand side. Yeah, there could be more arbitrary number of types, but we usually recommend to keep them low, because otherwise you won't get to see any results. But it's up to you to define the types in your application. It doesn't have to be the color. It could be, as I said, the semantics of the various nodes. We do offer the same technique for the other layouts too. So, for example, for the tree layout, for the generic one, there could be some of these elements that have a different meaning. Why not put them closer together if it doesn't change the overall layout at all? The same also works for the circular layout. This is already the case where we are considering the node types. This is the case where we don't consider. This would have been the regular result, but considering the node types gives a much better result, because you can easily see how many green, red, or blue nodes we have in the graph. There's also, this feature has been integrated to the organic graph. And as I said, there's also this new feature about the automatic clustering for organic. So let's have a look at this demo. Again, you can see that there's this substructure, and by default, we already, well, we ruined the show, because this is the default results that you would have received if you're not considering the types of nodes. And if you do consider them, you will see that for some of the substructure shapes we have in this layout, you will get more nicely aggregated node types. Check this out. We see that there's 3 different types in this kind of substructure, or over here and over here. And this works with the different substructure layouts just the same. So we can, for example, let's try it this way. So we have different stars going from this node, the blue ones, the red ones, and the green ones. Not considering these, they would all have been treated equal and would result in this mix and match. Next feature in layout is the selective edge routing. Selective edge routing is mostly used for the interactive use case. So consider you already have a diagram, maybe created automatically or created interactively by the user. Now, if you make changes to those diagrams, you will possibly ruin the layout. Meaning that some of the edges start overlapping with other nodes. For example, if a node changes its size because we were expanding or collapsing them, some of the edges need to be fixed, but others don't need to be fixed at all or only locally. And this is what this feature does. It will automatically detect which edges to adjust and fix and which ones can stay just the same. And this also works just for parts of the segment. So if the algorithm detects that parts of the edge can stay the same and only certain segments need to be rerouted, then this is going to happen automatically. And also for unrelated edges, of course. So these two edges need to be adjusted whenever I move another obstacle into the way, but the rest of the graph stays the same. This works for more complex and for simple edits just as well. And is more than what you can do with the traditional orthogonal edge routing that's already built in, or orthogonal edge editing that's already built into yFiles. Now let's take a look at the organic clustering and the various layout use cases that we have in the new layout styles demo. You may know this demo already. It existed in previous versions of yFiles too, but has received a massive overhaul. You can now get to see the various layout algorithms together with a set of different presets that work well for different use cases. So the value of this demo is mostly in the source code, because you can take a look at the different configurations, how they actually have an influence. So if you're looking for an incremental layout, you will see which properties actually are especially important for this use case. And you will find that in the sources too, to copy them into your application. So if you're looking for a flowchart and you know it's going to be using the hierarchic layout, you can see what settings are specifically important for this kind of layout. We also introduced some real world use cases. For example, if you want to look at a computer network and you want to see the features that I just showed you in the other demo, they are also highlighted over here. So this is the clustering that I was talking about, the automatic clustering, where previously we had just one clustering method implemented by default. You can now choose between different implementations like Louvain modularity, label propagation, or edge betweenness in order to do the clustering on the organic layout. So much for this demo. And now on to graph algorithms, not the layout algorithms, but the graph algorithms that you can also run using yFiles. What's new here? We've had this for all the complex graph analysis algorithms for a while, like centralities or the clustering or network flows, etc. But we were actually missing out on this very simple algorithms, which are also very common. And so now we fixed that. Finally, you can run those very simple tree analysis algorithms, like in this example, the nearest common ancestor functionality on your graph and specify subgraphs. For example, in this case, if your graph contains more than just a tree, but you know you only want to find the nearest common ancestor of the subgraph induced by the thick edges, in this case, edges thicker than 2 pixels or 2 units, and you wanted to use a specific root node, then you can now easily do that. So nothing new, but a lot easier to use and convenient to use for your visualizations. So next to something very important for this release, and this is all about performance. Multi-threaded layout, not blocking the UI thread, is important specifically for large graphs and long-running algorithms. And while it was possible to do so before, it required quite a bit of work on that is the developer side, at least for the web platform, where this is specifically difficult to implement. We now dramatically simplified this far. So just compare these two code snippets. Basically, above, we have the layout on the main thread, and below in a web worker. And as you can see, that there's almost no difference. So basically, you can convert your code that you have, like the one in above, to the one below, and get multi-threaded layout and algorithm execution, basically with just 3 or 4 more lines of code. And that layout execution could not just be in a web worker, which is the main use case, but it could also be on a Node.js server. Or if you must, even in a different process on the same service or browser, or even the browser tab. The implementation for this is actually quite straightforward. We do all the marshalling of the data for the graph and the structure and all the constraints known as the additional layout data that you may pass to, just like, for example, the node type information that we had before. And all you need to do is transfer a blob that we create for you to the worker. And we have code examples that you can just drop into your code base to get this working with the major technologies. So this is really easy to do now. And we have this in our developers guide, and it's really just a few paragraphs that will let you migrate from blocking UI thread calculation to multi-threaded web worker calculations. So let's see how that actually works. That's not much to see because, well, it happens in the background. But for example, in this application, you can see that I can interact with the main thread while the layout is running in the backend, and this is working a web worker. And whenever the layout runs, I can still interact with the page, and I could show an animation and things like that. So very easy. The most important changes in the source code for the end user, just the user experience, it gets improved. There's nothing else about that. So now next we come to interaction. What's new in 2021 in yFiles? There's actually only a few minor changes, but sometimes it's the subtle things that really make a great difference. You may have already noticed, I don't know whether Zoom can actually show that information. You may have already noticed the smooth scrolling in the demos that I showed already. You really only notice that once it's turned off, and then it feels like something is missing. What's smooth scrolling? Smooth scrolling means that if you're using your mouse wheel to pen or zoom the graph, it usually went tick after tick. And with the new smooth scrolling technique, you get 60 frames per second smooth zooming. And really, believe me, that makes a difference as small as that setting may be. On the API perspective, we've enabled that feature by default. So if you don't need it, all you need to do is just set one property and turn it off again. But it will make a difference, believe me, for your graph visualizations. On the API part, we have been listening to what your users have been saying. So one important thing was when people are working with large databases, graph databases, data sources, they needed asynchronous callbacks for the querying of tooltips and context menus. This was a bit cumbersome to do before, but with this release, it gets really easy to do, meaning that you can asynchronously provide the tooltip contents, and yFiles will just wait for you to deliver the results and then display the tooltips and the context menus. But now to the topic that probably most of you have been waiting for. I'm really excited because I think this will bring yFiles on a whole new level, I guess. While we have been really hesitating for a long time to do this, the big data world basically that we're living in forced us to do this. Visualizing large graphs is not a great idea in general, and I hope many of you will agree. But sometimes you, at least you think, that you just don't have another option than throwing this large graph visualization at your users. So previously, there was a limit, I'd say, that was around maybe 10K nodes. But with the new approach that we've been implementing in yFiles for HTML, we've been leveraging WebGL 2.0 to bring that to a whole new level. WebGL 2.0 is available on all modern browsers today, meaning you can add that feature to your application unless your users are really on older hardware or browsers, meaning Internet Explorer is completely out of question. And unfortunately, Safari and iOS don't have this enabled by default yet, but this is probably going to change soon. And it does work on Safari and iOS too. What does this mean? This means that most of the animations and the simple interactions that you do when you interact with the graph can actually be performed on the GPU, meaning there's hardly any work for the JavaScript engine to do anymore, enabling the display of several thousands of items, even on mobile devices at 60 frames per second. I tested this on this medium mid-range gaming PC on my son's gaming PC, and I was able to render more than 2 million items on the screen at 60 frames per second animated. So that was just mind-blowing. I still believe it's not a good idea to do this because there's not that much pixels on most screens, but it worked, and that was really cool to see. And as you can see, you don't have to change your code that much. There's this little function below here that you can add to your program, and it will transform the visualization and use the current API, the current iGraph API, and all the automatic layouts that you have, and enable editing and interaction with WebGL 2 rendered graphs. Meaning you can still let the users edit their diagrams. They can move and resize their elements. They can reparent nodes. They can expand and collapse select elements, and all this at smooth 60 frames per second, including animation. This comes at a cost, of course, meaning we do have to provide a fixed set of styles. We provide a way for you to use different shapes and to use arbitrary icons, but you cannot provide your own styles. We provide 3 different hardware accelerated edge styles too: the regular polyline that you know of yFiles, which can have any number of bends, but also 2 arc and bridge styles that lend themselves very well for these kinds of visualizations and perform really, really well. And you can have animations like fade and pulsating animations, and of course layout animations built into your apps too with these techniques. By the way, the screenshot shows that this is on my home desktop PC, which doesn't even have an inbuilt graphics card adapter, and it was animating 30,000 elements and was using like 20% of the time available. So I could easily like have 5 times the number of elements and render those on the screen. So let's, before we get to see this in action, let's take a quick look at the advantages that you have and also some of the different disadvantages. We think the focus on large graphs is really on exploring the data rather than editing and working with it. So there are a few things that we are leaving out in the current implementation, actually on purpose and to get the best possible performance. we really can't wait to see what our users will be creating with this powerful tool. And we would like to hear your feedback on what additional features you might need. We are confident that we have covered all the use cases that we are really aware of, that also the competition has to offer, and actually a lot more. But of course, the traditional yFiles API does have more flexibility to offer. So you can't just yet use edges at edges or have dedicated port visualizations. Implementing custom styles apart from providing your own icons and labels isn't possible. But you can do advanced things like have arbitrary group node nesting, and you can have bends and port locations and get really technical drawings. Can have any number of labels and icons, any number of text labels associated with nodes and edges. And you can use the isometric rendering if you want to, and add those heat maps and the dynamic backgrounds that we see, that you know from our examples. But as I said, there's so much more in the API that we just were not able to cover at this level of performance. So send us your feedback, and if you have a question, also feel free to enter it in the chat now. There's a lot of attendees today, so we're probably not going to be able to answer all of them, but we will live in this webinar, but we're going to respond to all of them in the chat if you want to. But now let's see that thing in action. So the first example that I would like to show you is the large tree demo. So this isn't really a large tree yet, but this shows the potential, because I hope that Zoom will transport the fact that this is 60 frames per second. Let's just increase the number of elements on this sample graph, and you see two features. You see the automatic layout morphing and the automatic layout actually calculating this layout for, in this case, 300 elements. And if you watch closely, you see that there's a fade out and a fade in animation with the elements that are added to the graph. So that's one of the animations that we have been adding to yFiles. So now let's crank the numbers up a little. So now we are at 2000 elements, and it's still buttery smooth. If you don't see that in Zoom, you need to believe me or try out the demo later on. And let's go to some smarter numbers. You see that it's getting that there's this hard-coded limit in here in the demo. Let's go to the next demo where I can add actually more items. And I think in the current version, you can crank this up to, I tried it with 200,000 elements, and I have this video which I will share with you after this session. Unfortunately, it's disabled in the demo, but let's see that later on. Here we have the icon demo showing the different icon rendering that we can do, and the label rendering. So labels and icons are rendered all on WebGL, meaning that you get awesome performance even for large graphs. And by large, we mean things like this. So this now just created 100,000 nodes, all with different icons. Let me zoom in, and that's fully interactive, meaning that you can still select elements, work with them, move them around, resize them, create edges, and so on. And of course, with multiple bends and so on. And it stays interactive. And this is on a medium. I think it's a low-end graphics card. It's the lowest that you can get. It's a 1030 NVIDIA GeForce graphic card that I have on this machine here. So really, if you crank this up, you can get up to 2 million items, and it will still work as smooth as here. And let's take a look at the rendering optimizations demo, just to prove that the performance is that good, because this one has the FPS counter over here. Now let's use a more complicated layouts with bends and ports, and still it's still the panning. and it's at 60 frames per second. Zooming and panning all work. This is just 21,000 elements, but it shows the potential. It clearly shows the potential. And of course, you can use the approach to dynamically switch between different visualizations, switching between SCG rendering, canvas rendering, WebGL1 or WebGL2 rendering, if available. Okay, the WebGL animation demo I will do later probably, because we've seen this already. We have some more time. Another huge part of this release is all about developer productivity. So what do we have in this release for you, for the software developers? And this is specifically for the JavaScript version in this case. We have the yFiles Dev Suite, which is a visual interactive tool that dramatically improves the developer experience, mostly for new developers of yFiles, but also for existing users seeking our support or when creating new applications. We also have a big focus on TypeScript. In corporate environments, TypeScript is getting more and more established, and we saw many requests in the past for more sample code in TypeScript. So we converted almost all of our demos and all code snippets in the developer's guide and API documentation so that they are now available for TypeScript and JavaScript. You can just copy them into your TypeScript projects without having to do those few remaining adjustments. Of course, not everyone uses TypeScript, and we don't have any plans on making this a requirement. So you can still use JavaScript. All the demos that we have are available in JavaScript and TypeScript. However, the improved typings that we have in this release also help JavaScript developers when writing JavaScript and reading the snippets. We now support multiple TypeScript versions, even with their TypeScript incompatible changes. And we have built-in support for TypeScript versions larger than 4. And we're working hard on also supporting the new features released just in the most recent 4.3 release of version, which was released just a few days ago. And we're already compatible with this one. It's just that we don't yet support the new features. The new typings that we have will allow for improved coding assistance and more concise code for you to write. Of course, fewer errors, and when coding with both TypeScript and JavaScript. So what's this Dev Suite? It's a tool that you can download and install from NPM, not today. So if you're trying this today, you won't. If you're trying to run this, you won't get anything useful. So don't do it. It's just a placeholder at the moment. If you do that once we have it released, you will get access to this very nice web application, which will help you to manage and set up your yFiles installation. It will help you with the evaluation process, download and install the demos and the library and so on. It will also help you to run, edit, or duplicate the demos, or create new applications from existing demos, or revert the demos to their original state. And you can scaffold new applications with the help of this application easily. There's several guides that will allow you to create your own applications. And last but not least, also for the existing customers, you can use this to contact our help services, to contact our support services. This tool integrates nicely with our customer backend so that you can log in, ask questions, and send us your source code and the things that you changed. Let's take a look at how that works. I already downloaded and started the application, which is just an npm package it's just an npm install away. And once you have it, so where is it? This is the application that starts. It's basically starts like our new README that you have, and it will guide you through all the steps that you might be interested in. Most importantly, it will allow you to automatically launch the demo servers and then take a look at the demos that we have. So if you're looking for a certain demo, let's take a look, for example, at the WebGL2 demo that we have. I could be launching it from here. It's just the locally hosted version. And this is the 10,000 icons I just showed you. Let's just close all of this. I can also use this to actually edit the demo. So if I edit the demo, it will open my IDE, because I can, in the settings, I can tell it that I have where my yFiles package is located on my the existing or the evaluation version on my system. It can make use of my version control system to help me revert changes or view the diff, and it can launch my IDE of choice. And so now it started this case Visual Studio Code. And now let me just make some changes here. So let's do some, just make the graph a little smaller and see what happened. So now it's probably not going to be 40,000. Yeah, that's not 40,000. That's not 100,000 nodes. That's far fewer nodes. So I changed the code, and it will actually show me that I modified the code, and I can actually see what I did. And in this case, let's just try and request support. It shows me what changes I made to the demo, and say, yes, I want to send this information to the yWorks support team. And let's just ask the question, why is the graph so small? Help. So yeah, that's probably not the best kind of support question that you should be asking. So this is just for demonstration purpose. Let's see whether I get an answer for this one. And if someone actually helps me with this code, I will get a notification once there's an answer, and then I can probably fix the problem that I have in this case here. So that's one part of this application, where I can work with the demos and modify them, play with them, run with them, etc., and ask for support. I can also launch into the documentation and see learn more about the features. And as I said, I can also create my own yFiles app using this tool. Oh, there's something happened up on top of here. I think I got a new message. Please try to revert the demo. Yeah, sure. Thanks. So let's go back to the demo. That was helpful. Let's just revert the demo. Accept. Revert it. Oops, that's the other demo. So it's not modified anymore, but I started, I think. Yeah, there it is. Let's see if it works again. Yeah, awesome. So thanks for that, Fabian. I was going to show you how to create your own application, and you may have heard that we have been releasing our new app generator a couple of months ago, and with this release, we really have integrating that functionality into the yFiles evaluation package. So if you're creating a new application, you can use this tool to scaffold a new application. There's a wizard built into where I can tell it to create a new project. Let me put it over there, and then I can then it will launch the app generator. It will help me to scaffold the application of the type that I want to. For example, I would like to have a React application, which should be TypeScript, should be prettier, and some of the basic features, I want to have them all in my application. And once I hit create, it will automatically go and scaffold that application. And I can then just open it in my IDE and start from there. So very, very convenient, and covers a whole range of different applications. But of course, we are probably going to miss some of them. So we really need your feedback on this too. But so much for the for this tool, the yFiles Dev Suite. What's next? You will probably ask. Yeah, we are going to add more demos to our large graph use cases. The initial 2.4 release scheduled for well, as I said, 4 weeks about. We'll have some use cases, but we're going to add more use cases after that in the minor bug fixes and maintenance releases. We'll have more source code demos specifically for different layout styles, because we've seen that there's so many options, and our main layout demos really is getting larger and larger. So we will be creating demos that are focused on certain aspects of the API. We will support more frameworks and tool chains and improve the dev suite that you just saw. So for example, you will be able to use the technology that we're using for enabling the web worker support to actually send your graph and layout settings to our support team for them to inspect. So if there's a problem you have, you will be able to just send your graph right from the application to our support team for inspection. And then you will be able to, in case the answer is not just revert the changes you made stupid, you can also accept pull requests from our support team and let them fix the problems in your code immediately through the UI. And we'll be adding achievements too. So for those of you hunting for achievements, you will be really happy once we have this integrated into the dev suite. As I said, we're making more improvements to the app generator too. Specifically, we will be giving it more control over the layout right in the UI, so that if you don't want to code, you can still use many of the options in the UI to scaffold your own applications. If you have been following our social media channels closely, or if you continue to do so, you will get notified when those versions will become available. So I encourage you to do that. But in the meantime, let me see some of your questions. I see there has been a lot of activity in the chat, so let's go through some of them. Oh, that's a lot. So yeah, as I said, we'll get back to you because we're probably not going to be able to do all of this in this session, but let's just go through some of them. So what's with Safari and iOS and WebGL? Yeah, as I said, it's a good question. If I knew what was up with them, that would probably mean I would be working for Apple. So for most devices that we tested, this actually works. So if you're on a modern iPhone or iOS device, once you enable the experimental feature, the so-called experimental feature, which has been experimental for I believe 5 years now, it will just work. And on older devices, so we still saw a number of issues and incomplete or a faulty implementation of the standard. We hope that Apple will be enabling this feature by default for at least for the more modern devices with the next major announcements. And well, for Mac OS, you can always switch to a modern browser like Firefox and the Chromium-based engines, which really worked well in our tests, even on old devices. So Mac OS is really not a problem. For older iOS devices, well, let's just keep our fingers crossed. And well, as I said, it's always better to actually show smaller graphs anyway, and particularly on handheld devices. There's probably not much that we can do here other than hope for Apple to do the right thing. Another questions. I see dedicated port visualizations is not possible. So if I have to show network interfaces of nodes, won't that be possible? That's just for the WebGL2 rendering, which doesn't have the dedicated port visualization. So which means that I don't know whether for network visualization you really need to have these large graphs at all. So the technologies that we have right now should work too. And you can always have a mixture of them too. So if you zoom out and if there's really like 100,000 devices, I guess you wouldn't really need those port visualization anyway. So you can like basically use a level of detail approach and not render the ports once you're zoomed out and you see all your network. And once you zoom in, you switch back to SVG or high detailed visualization where you do have these port visualizations. But if we get a lot of requests, we will probably be able to add this in the future because we already are considering adding arbitrary icons as labels to nodes, and this mean and technically this is basically the same as port visualization. So any node can have any number of labels and it can have the icon. So you can also render that port visualization onto the icon itself, meaning that if you have just a small number or a medium range number, several hundred of different devices, which all have the same kind of ports, you can add that rendering right to the visualization of those basically those icons, because they don't just have to be like these font awesome icons. These can be really larger images, complex images, even pictures, and then you would be able to visualize ports too. And another question is, are there the improvements for the large graphs planned for the VPF version of yFiles? It does look really cool in WebGL. Yeah, WebGL obviously is something that's not supported in WPF as the name implies. So we are considering this at the moment, but considering that the general performance in WPF is a bit better for many use cases than what the SVG implementation has to offer. The need is not as much there, but I would really be I'm really curious. I don't see who asked that questions, but I will be able to see that later. So just give us more details. We have been thinking about this, but honestly, at the moment, there are no such plans. It would be possible to do the same thing if we were going with OpenGL on the WPF platform. But as I said, we don't have plans for this at the moment. Another question. This is about TypeScript typings. Right now, there's a big single file with typings. It makes so many time to load it in IntelliJ IDEA. Splitting this large file into multiple small files. Yeah, for one thing, I would argue that you should not be opening that file in IntelliJ IDEA. It will parse that file, and actually it works quite well as soon as it was parsed. So initially it will take about 3 or 4 seconds at least on my PC, and once it's loaded, it's the information is there immediately. That file is not meant to be browsed. It's a generated file. So I would like to propose to not open that file in your editor, but only use the built-in. Let me show that quickly, just very quickly. So this is what we're talking about. If you're on a project and you're looking up the documentation, as you see, the first time it took a few seconds, but once it's loaded, it's really quick. So I would recommend looking at the documentation this way via the integrated built-in viewer, and you can always switch back to the online documentation, which I don't know whether this is already linked, because this is the EAP early access version. But in your version, this link will open the documentation in your browser, and will actually give you a much better browsing experience, because we have the code snippets in there, and you can switch between TypeScript and JavaScript documentation and so on. So this is the recommended approach is not to open that file, which happens when you control click. And once it's loaded that file, it does take a while, you're correct, but it's not that useful because it shows the same information that you see when you hit Control Q over here, or read the online documentation. Yeah, it does take a while indeed, specifically when I'm still streaming this application. So next question. Sorry. What is it? I have one question regarding the update. Are there any breaking changes to expect, or do you stick to Zemware and it's simply a lib code replacement? Very good question. I think if it was Zemware, it would have to be 3.0, very strictly speaking. As you know, our API has more than 10,000 public API members, and there are, I think, about a handful of incompatible changes in less frequently used APIs. So essentially, there's almost no incompatible API change. And I bet that for at least about 95% of our customers, this is going to be a drop in replacement, meaning that you can just switch to the new library and then use the new features. There are really only minor incompatible changes in there. And the new APIs that I showed you really seamlessly integrate into the existing ones. You can treat this as a second level Zemware release, even if very strictly speaking, it probably would have to be 3.0 because there's 2 or 3 incompatible changes among these 10,000 public API members. So yeah, in practice, it's going to be drop-in replacement. Is it possible to use the yWorks Webpack Optimizer plugin with Rollup? If yes, do you have some examples? Well, you can use the optimizer with Rollup, and this is actually already demonstrated in the Rollup.js demo. And with this release, also we're finally adding support for Webpack 5, which had an incompatible API change, which made it impossible for us to support Webpack 5 from the beginning with our optimizer plugin. But this has recently been fixed. Maybe it's already online already. I don't know, to be honest. But it's if not in this release, we're going to update the framework latest demos to the latest versions. So Rollup.js Webpack and Angular CLI, Vue CLI, and so on. They will all be updated to the latest versions. And as far as I know, they all work together with our plugin. Can yWorks be used to run graph algorithms without the GUI? Yes. We have a Neo4j database and would be interested in finding bi-connected components and 10,000 nodes. Yeah. We actually have a demo that shows how to use yFiles without a UI, and I think that's pretty much exactly the name. Let's see whether our browser can help us find this without layout, without a view. This is it. Not very spectacular layout, but what it does is demo. It computes the graph layout or the graph analysis algorithms just the same without showing them on the screen. Meaning that you could run this on a Node.js server or in your browser. And for 10,000 nodes, this is actually easily doable for a simple algorithm like finding bi-connected components. And so yes, you could use that, even the JavaScript version. But probably depending on your exact use case, it might be more interesting to take a look at the Java or C# variants to run them on the server. But technically, it's possible to do this with all of our platforms without a UI and in a non-interactive mode. One question is, how can we insert more than 5 or 6 pictures in one node? If this is about WebGL, then the current answer is to use multiple labels or to merge them into one picture, because you have full control over the pixel data. Any item would work. If it's about the regular yFiles API, then that's very simple. Then you can. I think with this release we actually have a new demo style that shows exactly this, how to assemble multiple styles into one. And if you've seen our Data Explorer for Neo4j demo, you can see that this also works with custom styles. So if you need more details, please contact our support team. Last question for today, and then we're done. Next question is, yFiles 2021 still supports GWT? Yes. For the previous version, we had the GWT version, and we are pretty sure that we will also going to be able to convert this 2.4 version for GWT. I'm excited to see the poll results, how many people are still using GWT. I know that it's still being used in the corporate world, but honestly, if you're starting something new, please don't use it. It's not a good idea. Okay, I think we'll get back to you. There's more questions, but we'll get back to you via email during the next days. So far, thank you very much for staying with me for so long, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. And please stay tuned on our social networks. We will be publishing those demos that I just showed to you on our web server in the coming days, maybe even on Friday already. So you can play with that new WebGL features and rendering demos and the new layouts starting the day after tomorrow already. So please do give us your feedback. Tell us about what works for you, what doesn't work, and we'll be happy to hear your feedback and get back to you. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Goodbye.